I know you're going through a tough time. You gave your all to this relationship, but in the end you lost her anyway. And that pain isn't something that's limited to your chest. It's a feeling that invades you, that envelops you and accompanies you everywhere. It's that feeling you get when you lie awake at night, when the silence engulfs you, when every thought brings you back to her. It's the emptiness in your stomach every time you check your phone, and there's no message from her. Every memory that comes back to your mind seems to be a blade that reminds you of what you once had that is now gone. You find yourself wondering what went wrong, what you could have done to avoid it. Maybe you begged, maybe you promised her you'd change, or maybe you gave her space hoping she'd come back to you, but nothing worked. And now you feel trapped, lost in regret and despair, as if you're desperately searching for something to fix everything. Something that can rekindle that spark that has gone out. But let me tell you something, and please listen carefully. You are looking at everything the wrong way. This is not the end, it is just a turning point. It is time to stop, to take a step back and start looking at things from a different perspective. You no longer have to chase it, you no longer have to hope that it will come back to you. It is time to stop drowning in what-ifs, to stop playing the game of hope that consumes you. It is time to do what really works and to focus on yourself, to reclaim your strength. When I say get your strength back, I mean you have to go back to being the man you were before. Often in relationships, many men, without even realizing it, lose themselves. At first, they are strong, confident, independent, but then day after day they get caught up in the fear of losing the other and start to change. They become too available, too compliant. They rely on the woman for their happiness, for their validation, and they start to lose their sense of self. And when she starts to withdraw, they collapse. They feel empty and lost. Sound familiar? It's more common than you think, and history repeats itself. An example? In 1347 in Italy, there was a nobleman named Francesco de Later. This man had it all: a position of power, a respected family, the respect of everyone, and a beautiful wife who adored him. But as time went by, Francesco changed. He became obsessed with the thought of losing his wife. He began to fear that he wouldn't live up to her expectations. And because of this, he stopped being the strong, decisive, and confident man she had loved. Francesco became so dependent on his woman, on her approval, that he stopped living for himself. And what happened? She lost respect for him. The relationship became unbalanced, and eventually she left him for another man, a man who had a self-awareness that Francesco had lost. A man who wouldn't bend, who wouldn't change for fear of losing the other, but who remained firm in his convictions. Francesco, in the end, lost everything and never recovered. Now, my friend, you are not Francesco, and that is what should give you hope. You have the power to choose, you have the ability to act differently. You can continue to chase her, to lose yourself and fight for something that is no longer there. Or you can look at yourself in the mirror, face reality, and go back to being the strong and confident man you were before. Don't let this experience destroy you. Don't let fear and despair take over. You deserve to be the best version of yourself, and the fact that you lost this relationship does not mean that you have lost the value you have as a person. Now is the time to get up, take charge of your life, and choose to be the man she once loved. When I talk about getting your strength back, it's not just about going back to being the man you were before, but about becoming a man who isn't afraid to walk with his own head. Many men, in the course of a relationship, lose a part of themselves. They don't do it intentionally, but because of the emotional involvement and the desire to make the other person happy, it ends up happening. They begin to sacrifice their independence, to always be available, to adapt to what the other person wants, to constantly seek validation. This behavior at first may seem like a way of expressing affection, but over time it becomes a trap that traps them in a dynamic in which they are no longer themselves. If you see yourself in all this, understand that the point is to regain your independence, not to prove something to her, but to find yourself again. You have to stop being that man who constantly worries about how she might react to every little gesture. Go back to being the kind of man who respected and valued himself before the relationship interfered with his self-esteem. You don't have to find your strength just to try to win her back, but to realize that you have a value that goes beyond any relationship. When you regain your self-respect, you will start walking with your head held high again, without depending on anyone to feel valid. Moving on to the second point, giving space to her absence does not mean ignoring it or pretending not to be there, but it is a fundamental step to create that emotional distance that allows her to begin to reflect on what she has lost. When you are too present in her life, even after a breakup, you do not give her the time and space to truly miss you. I will give you another example that may be familiar. Imagine that after a breakup you continue to send her daily messages, even if they are only good morning or good night. You do it because you think that by continuing to show yourself caring, you will remind her how much you care about her and make her reflect on what you have. But for her, these messages become just a habit. There is no longer the emotional burden that there was when you were together. When you stop sending those messages, when you stop doing those daily gestures, she begins to feel disoriented. For a moment, she will wonder if you have moved on, if you have forgotten about her. This gives rise to doubt that turns into curiosity, and that curiosity will lead her to ask herself if she has made the right choice. And more often than not, this reflection makes her miss what she had. Absence is powerful. It's not just about disappearing, but about making yourself feel truly absent, about making her realize that she no longer has access to you like she used to. When you do this, you don't do it for revenge or to get back at her. You do it for yourself. You're giving her the opportunity to reflect on you, but you're also showing yourself that you have the control and strength to let her go if necessary. As for the third point, redefining yourself for yourself, this is crucial. It's not a superficial change, like going to the gym just to improve your appearance. If you start changing just to try to get her back, she'll sense it right away. The key is that the change has to come from you, not from a desire to please her, but because you realize that in order to grow and improve, you have to do it for yourself. If during the relationship you put aside your dreams, your passions, your goals to focus exclusively on her, now is the time to take your life back. You have to start doing what makes you happy, what motivates you, what makes you feel fulfilled. Go to the gym, but not because you think it will get you back together, but because physical discipline is a way to train your mind and body to be stronger not only physically, but also psychologically. Start working on a project you've been putting off. Take on that professional challenge you've been putting off. Develop new skills, make new friends, become a person you respect, not because you're trying to win someone back, but because you want to evolve into a better version of yourself. When she sees the person you have become, it will no longer matter whether you get back together or not. Because in the meantime, you will have built a life that satisfies you, that makes you complete, that does not depend on anyone else to feel fulfilled. And the incredible thing is that when you focus on yourself and your personal growth, even if she were to come back, you will have already built a future that does not depend on her presence. It will be a choice, not a necessity. And if she does not come back, it will never be a problem because you will have built something that is truly worth living, with or without her. Point number 4 is about a fundamental concept: showing instead of telling. Women, and people in general, don't believe words, they believe actions. You can say that you've changed, that you're different now, but if you don't actually do anything to show it, your words will have no value. Let me give you an example of a man I knew who was in a long-term relationship and thought everything was fine until she left him. She told him she needed a man with ambition, with a direction in life. And what did he do? He begged her, promised her he would change, swore that things would get better. But of course, nothing happened, and eventually she walked away for good. That was his wake-up call, but not her words, not her leaving. The real turning point for him was the actual loss, losing her forever. And he finally realized that he had to stop talking about change and start actually changing it. He focused on building a business, he traveled, he devoted himself to his physical and mental well-being. He became more assertive, more confident, more in control of his life. A year later, he found himself at an event and ran into her again. She barely recognized him. She couldn't believe how much he had changed. And suddenly, she was the one who was attracted, but by then he was over her. That's where you have to get to. Not waiting for her to notice the change, but to get to the point where you don't even care if she does. Because when you really evolve, when you become better not for her, but for yourself, you won't need to convince anyone. They'll see it, she'll see it, and so will others. The fifth point, which is probably the hardest, is to be ready to let go for good. This is the most powerful and difficult part of all. You can't really get her back if you are afraid of losing her forever. Repeat this sentence. You can't get her back if you are still there, waiting for her to come back. As long as she feels that you are still there, waiting backstage, hoping she will come back, she will have no reason to do anything. There will be no urgency on her part. Deep down in her mind, you will always be there. But the moment she understands that you are really gone, that you are no longer chasing her, that you are no longer looking at her life, that you have stopped waiting, then everything changes. The most precious thing a man has is not his words, his efforts, or even his love. The most precious thing he has is his ability to choose where to invest his energy. And when she realizes that you're willing to take that energy out of her, when she sees that you've stopped chasing her, that's when she'll really start to feel the loss of you. And here comes the final lesson. If you've done everything I've said, if you've rebuilt yourself, if you've grown, if you've stopped chasing and started thriving, she'll notice. She'll feel it. And when that moment comes, you'll be the one to decide if she deserves a second chance. Because in the meantime, you might realize that you never lost her, she lost you. Finally, I want this part to really hit home for you. You can't control her, you can't force her back, but you can control yourself. You can decide how you want to grow, how you want to evolve, how you want to act from now on. A lot of men get stuck, waiting, hoping, checking her social media, living in the past. But the men who can truly change things don't wait, they act. Because when you take your power back, when you give her space, when you redefine yourself, not for her, but for yourself, then the power shifts. And when that day comes, when she finally sees the man you've become, you only have to ask yourself one thing. Does she really deserve a second chance? Because then you might realize that you never lost her. She lost you.